Hi, my name's Allison Berng.
And I'm Frank Keraudren, and we're here at the Berlin Film Festival where we're showing our film The Dog, which is a documentary about Jon Wojtowicz, a guy who tried to rob a bank in 1972 to pay for his lover's sex change operation.
And we made this film about a guy who is hilarious, offensive, charismatic, shocking, and we hope you'll be entertained.
I consider myself a romantic. There's sex and there's love. I'm a lover. When I met Ernie for the first time, it was love at first sight. And because I loved him on August 22nd, 1972, I had to do something.
All in all, August 22nd, 1972 was a summer day just like any other summer day. Hot, humid, close, with everyone trying to get a bit of relief from the oppressive heat and humidity. And then it happened. At 2:58 p.m. that afternoon, two men entered a bank in Brooklyn and began what turned out to be the most sensational, most bizarre, most unbelievable bank robbery in the history of crime. And before they were through, what should have been an ordinary bank robbery turned into a three-ring circus.
But so the first screening was good in total then, even though people did not get the
Oh,
rock
that's
thing?
only like one or two things. Yeah, I think it went really well. I mean, I think, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think so too. What's interesting is the people react in different places in the film than they do in America. You know, there's a lot of like humor and jokes and stuff, so usually you get laughs at certain points, which is not what we're trying to do, but you know, you can usually sit in the screening and see how it goes like that. Here it was very different. Like people were reacting, but in totally different places.
What was one of the spots that you were surprised at?
I can't remember exactly, but I know that some of the ones I expected, they didn't react. And I was like, oh, this is...
There was actually one when he said, you know, we're not recording it, are we?
Yes, we are.
Oh, we are.
Okay,
Well, because I was like, is language an issue on this show?
No.
Oh, okay. And I might be quoting our own movie wrong, but when he was explaining his name and he was saying, because my prick is small, everyone laughs in America. Nobody laughed here.
Yeah, maybe they didn't get it.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
basically saying, I'm calling myself Little John because I have a little penis, basically.
Yeah.
But the way he says it is a different word, and you know, people. I don't think people understood what he was saying.
Well, I remember the scene. I remember that I understood, but I didn't laugh either.
No, I mean, it's just a very strange thing. It's the kind of thing he would always throw in sentences like that, which is why we left it. It's not supposed to be really funny, but he was always pushing with, you know, sex talk and...
Well, I think it's that macho thing. In America, no man would ever admit that. So I think in America they laugh because they're like, wow, he's saying that out loud, you know? And so it gets a reaction.
So it's sort of breaking the social rules once again.
Yeah, exactly.
He would always do that when he was talking, especially in public, or and to him, in the beginning I thought he was doing it on purpose to, you know, to see how people react. But then if you spend enough time with the guy, you were like, he was always like that. He just didn't think about it, didn't care. Any question you ask, he would answer.
So it's not just empty provocation he's doing.
No, that's why we left in a lot of this stuff, because it's like if you take it all out, you don't really get a sense of the guy, you know, and a lot of it is inappropriate, but that's how he was, like at all times. Sometimes it was much worse than what's in the movie, you know?
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Well, it seemed to me as well that he's a very sexual person overall. I mean, he really liked to talk about sex and also about his sexual adventures a lot.
Yeah.
Did people here know about the background story?
You know, I think, what do you think?
Did people hear?
Yeah, well, is it well known in the US, or was it there as well that people didn't know about it?
All they
film
know
is
is
not-
about the bank robbery.
Okay.
People don't know anything past that. So I think for a lot of people who've seen the film so far, they're really surprised. They don't realize there's a lot more to his own story. And I think people, when they heard about our film, they really think it's just going to almost be a documentary of the play-by-play of the bank robbery. And they have no idea they're in for an entire life story.
Yeah, I think also maybe people know, generally they know the movie, Dog Day Afternoon. A lot of people don't even remember that it's based on a real event, a real story. So you can start with that thing, and then him, Jon Wojtowicz, nobody knows who he is.
Yeah, I didn't. I have to admit, I also didn't watch Dog Day Afternoon. I didn't know that one either. How did you get to know about it?
Well, we were watching. We both loved Dog Day Afternoon, but hadn't seen it in a long time. So we decide to watch it one night, and at the end, there's a card saying the real-life bank robber was sentenced to 20 years. So we somehow we added wrong. We added 10 years to that and thought he was getting out of prison the following year. And because he's such an amazing character, I think when you make documentaries, you're always intrigued by these, fascinating subjects. And so we thought it would be a great idea to find him. And then when we researched him, within 5 minutes, we found out he had been out of prison for, 22 years. But we found his mother in Brooklyn, and we spoke to her, and she passed on the message, and he called us in the middle of the night. And he said, his mother kind of gave the okay, said we sounded sexy. And
That's what she said?
Yeah.
And she was 85 or something.
Yeah. And I think, we were on the phone with him until the sun came up, and then we met him a few weeks later. Yeah.
And how was the first meeting? I mean, you already talked about that.
Yeah.
He was an impressive person. Was it also that you felt that at the first moment, or did it take time to discover him in a way?
No, I think that, well, the first meeting was unforgettable because it was, we met him in a restaurant and we ended up spending 9 hours with him.
Wow.
We thought it was, a brief meeting, but he showed up, he brought newspaper articles and photos and this and that, but he also acted from the first second. He acted as if he knew you, and as if there was no, like right off the bat, he was very, sort of loud and aggressive and funny, but not like you would act with somebody when you just meet them. So we were intrigued, but also when we listened to all his stories, I think that's the day we realized it's much more than a story about a movie or a story about Dog Day Afternoon or anything. It was like this guy, his life, his character was really interesting from the get-go. I mean, a little bit scary and crazy, but in a way that was interesting.
But did you have the feeling that he acted, or was it really his personality?
Well,
Yeah.
his personality is sort of an act in a sense. I mean, that's him all the time. He never really turns it off. So, I mean, I think he is sort of like that born entertainer, and he speaks in perfect sound bites, and he does that whether the camera's rolling or not. So, I mean, for us, he was immediately entertaining. I mean, when you're in a room with him, he is loud, and everyone's sort of turning around. He knows how to get attention, and he wants it. So, it's not often that you're doing a documentary. It's a real life person, and they're sort of made to be on camera. Yeah.
And you followed him for 10 years, if I'm right informed?
It's not quite. It took us about 10 years on and off to make the film, but he passed away in 2006. So we met him, we knew him for about 5 years, and after that, for those 5 years, we almost only filmed him and his mother a little bit. And then after he passed away, we started looking up all his friends, his ex-wives, a number of people. He always knew that we were going to include them in the film. And they were all people we could find and approach, but they didn't want to have anything to do with him. Because they were old friends and old lovers, and they were just like, this guy is just, he will never change, he'll drive you crazy, and one day you'll just walk away. And I think for us it was just a matter of time also, I don't think you could really put up with him for too long, but he knew, and they were very open about him, his ex-wives and boyfriends.
Also, once you are in his circle, he's very demanding. So there's almost no time for anybody else. While the dog's around, you're just kind of with him. And so it was all him for about 4 or 5 years, and then we filled in the blanks afterwards.
So that is also part of this, that he's demanding a lot, that he draws a lot of attention to him, that you really can't do anything else when you are with him.
Yeah, there's that. I mean, the other thing I would say about 10 years that it took is because we made the film sort of completely, no budget, nothing, and we couldn't really push forward faster than that. So in the beginning we thought, this is terrible, it's a problem, we'll never get this movie. But then we realized actually it really helped, because you cover something for such a long period, you get like a much, much bigger perspective and a bigger arc in the story, So it ended up working in our favor, I suppose.
But that is surprising to me, that you had almost no budget, because it really doesn't look like it, because it looks like you've done a lot of research, that you looked up a lot of things in archives and so forth. I mean, you have TV shows in there, you have newspaper articles, everything. I mean, that must have been very time consuming, and I guess that also took quite a lot of money, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much there was no budget, there was no funding.
Okay.
So it was self-financed. So we were working basically to pay to make our film, and yeah, I mean, there's extensive archival research and a lot of other elements that
Dramatic moment.
dramatic elements.
No, but you know, it's
Talking about money.
Yeah, no, it was this was definitely a passion project, and as obsessive as the dog could be, I guess you could say we sort of fell down the rabbit hole with him because we thought it was an incredible film to have the opportunity to make, and so we just never wanted to let it go. And there were many times along the way that we didn't know how we were going to pull it off. So it feels great to be at this point that we could share it with audiences here.
I mean, also all of the archival images, the stills, all that, which were really important to us. We didn't want to do recreations and stuff like that. We wanted all the real images, but you can do your research and find all that and sort of pay at the end. You don't have to license everything when you're editing. So we were just looking and looking and looking, and it took many years, I think, to find all the pieces.
Yeah.
But in terms of funding, you can make a film like that, sort of on your own. We just had to shoot, interviews, and everything was local in New York.
Yeah.
So, 2 people.
What I basically want to know is, did you see a difference between the person that you sort of found in the archives, the newspaper articles about him and the stuff he said about his past, and also other people said about his past, and the person that you met in reality, the one you talked with? Did you see changes in him?
Yes and no. I mean, there's some things that are incredible that you hear him say 30 years ago, and we would hear them, maybe you find an old radio interview during the bank robbery or some images from a TV show, and he would say sentences, the same exact things that he would say to us. Not the same words maybe, but no change at all. Zero change, and if you think about a guy who went to prison, who had 20 years to think about it, all that, no change. But on the other hand, I would say that maybe by the time when we met him, he was about late 50s. It turned out to be the end of his life, and I think it was becoming maybe more exaggerated, the character that he invented for himself, because he had less and less things in his life. So this became his whole thing. He was like, I'm the guy from Dog Day Afternoon, So he just kept making this movie in his head, and it was his life. But there was a part of it also that was very real.
Yeah, and I would say in terms of his sort of that sexually charged, over-the-top personality, I think that's always been him. I mean, when you speak with his first wife, Carmen, and this is before the bank robbery, he was still so outrageous then. That never changed. He showed up on their first date with another woman or two, I think. Right away he's trying to manipulate and pin people against them, and always going after what he's passionate about, what he wants to pursue, his pleasure, and being very upfront about it. So I think in terms of those qualities, he's been the same.
Did you have the feeling that he was a lonely person in the end? Because you already said that a lot of people that he dealt with in his life did not want to have contact with him anymore. And already during the bank robbery, if I got it right, was it that way that he got the money, but then his girlfriend said, well, no, actually, I don't want to have the change. Or I don't want to have the contact with you, and I don't want you to give me the money. She was already refusing.
Oh no, she wanted the money.
Wanted?
And she wanted the change, but she also knew she had to move on because it was too traumatic and too much, So she knew it was more a case of okay, I have to take care of myself. I can't keep seeing you and going to prison to see you and all that.
Yeah.
But
well, I'd say he never came across as lonely or hurting from the loneliness. I think for us, looking, it seemed like a lonely life, but he was always with his mother, and he had, when he says he also had 32 girlfriends, there were a lot of people in his life that he could ring up anytime he wanted. I think the people who had to step away were the people who had the deeper relationships with him. But there were people in New York that, we met that he was in touch with, and so it didn't seem. What might seem sad to us, I don't think he had that kind of insight to feel that way about himself. He still viewed his life, it's like that story, that movie playing in his own head, and you could call it delusional, but he saw it as like he was living life the way he wanted to, so he was okay with it.
The life he wanted to, and it seems that on every level he was a very intense person. That if you say that everyone who got too close after a while couldn't be with him anymore, it sounds that it was really intense to be with him.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
And if you had some distance, it would work. But
Yeah, I think there's one person told us, somebody who had been with him for a few years, and they said the real problem is when you became romantically involved with him, because then mentally he would switch to another thing, almost like he owns you or you owe him things, and I don't think he would let people go very easily. So, you know, you might find yourself in a relationship with a guy like that, and then one day you want to move on and you realize, okay, for the next 10 years he's going to be calling me and following me. So, you know, some people actually, I think, made efforts to get away from him a little bit, but he was not dangerous for them. It was just more like he would just never go away and never move past that. So with us, it wasn't like that. He was just difficult as a person with everybody because he always wanted everything his way, and he just didn't care about consequences. So if you said no, he'd be like, okay, so I won't see you again. And he'd disappear for a month, and then he would call you, or he would punish you or whatever, not with us, but he would do something, you know. He just didn't want to hear no, ever. And that's why probably he ended up taking hostages and being in this situation, because he was just the guy who was like, I want this, I'm going to do this, and he just looked straight ahead, you know.
so difficult and fascinating at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, you know what's interesting about that? I sometimes I watch the film with other people, with an audience, and I almost wonder, I'm like, wow, this guy is like, you know, he's not a hero, he's not commendable and all that, but it's really interesting in general to see movies where people do crime or crazy stuff that you can't do in your real life. Like in a movie, it's fun, it's engaging, it's liberating. You're like, oh, I don't have to worry about the consequences. In real life, it's very different, because obviously you can't live like that. You can't live without any consequences to what you do. But he was that kind of person. So it's fascinating, but it's also like watching something that, you know, you never know where it's going to go. It's a little unsettling, you know.
Yeah, and he's a very flawed person, but he's also sort of this throwback romantic, and I think that for audiences, they see that about him. And in real life, too, I mean, he really is a romantic. He is, you know, the flowers and the cards and the, you know, he does all of that. And so I think that it throws people off because they're like, wow, what a guy, you know, you don't see that anymore. And they might forget a little bit that he also has a much darker side.
So one thing is for certain, and at least that he's not one-sided. That he has a lot of, a lot of different perspectives in himself.
Yeah.
Something I also wondered about when you did your research, after this bank robbery, has there been a discussion about sex changes in the USA? Was that something that triggered discussions, this case?
Well, you know, that's a good question. I don't know how much it triggered. I think it took a lot of people by surprise, and for probably many people watching the news at home, that might have been the first time that they had heard about this. So I think maybe it was the opening of a door in a sense. To what extent, I don't know whether people really looked into it much before, you know, past that. But yeah, I mean, I feel like in New York City, there's a lot of different people who probably had never considered this before. And what's interesting is that a lot of people who saw Dog Day Afternoon and say they love the film, they don't remember that the dog was gay. They don't remember that the character of Sonny was gay. They remember this macho guy robbing a bank. And so we had a real opportunity making our film to really go into that side of this, which is a huge part of his life and a huge part of the story.
Yeah.
I also think, I mean, what was interesting, but it was difficult for us in the film, clearly, like the character of Liz, who's John's lover who wanted the sex change, is you know, fascinating. I mean, a fascinating person, and I mean, a very difficult, sad story in a way. But I think she was somebody who genuinely wanted to go down that route, but in those days you also have to remember, I mean, in the early 70s in the United States, homosexuality was still regarded as classified as a mental illness. So I'm sure that, I mean, I don't know this for a fact. We spoke to somebody who actually went to the sex change with Liz and all that, and he was saying, you know, it was very, I mean, no counseling, no support, none of that existed at the time. So I don't know if it started any discussion about these issues, but I think in those days it was something that was sort of getting on the map, and maybe the story, like to some people who had not really thought about it, it brought that topic a little bit to the attention of the public. I don't know.
And it's so interesting to, you know, see the film now. I think a lot of people are amazed that here's a man who's talking about gay marriage in the early 70s in the United States, and as we were editing, and gay marriage became such a timely topic, you know, and that's something that up until his death he was talking about and he really believed in. And so I think people really appreciate that. For all of his bad choices, there are certain things that he was definitely ahead of his time, and you know, he really believed in individual rights and didn't have a shred of shame about who he was. And so I think that's why a lot of people look at him and his story and they feel, you know, this is actually more important in terms of early gay rights history than I realized. So it's you know, even when we started the film, we didn't realize how much footage we would find that would apply, and so we feel it's a very special part of our film, that section.
You were already talking about individual rights and so forth. As a last question, maybe, do you think that your movie is still something that is controversial or can be seen controversial? You already had some screenings. Did people take it as something controversial?
Well, we keep expecting it to be more controversial because, you know, one of the words we use is offensive. He could offend people. I mean, not everyone's going to agree with what he says, nor probably should they. But again, I think we really tried to find that balance between the charismatic and the darker sides to him and everything in between. And so I think really there's some people who actually knew the dog back then. They probably feel it's more controversial because they saw in person what we experienced in terms of the demands and how he would drive people away. And so I think for the people who knew him best, they probably feel like, oh yeah, John. You know, other than that, people seem to really appreciate him.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you could say, you know, the film, clearly it touches on some issues that are controversial. To us, they're not, but clearly, you know, marriage equality, things like that are still very controversial in certain places, and I think it's like the issues themselves I wouldn't say are controversial. The fact that we're going through these issues, following the story of a guy who's so odd and strange and you know, not necessarily a nice guy or anything. I mean, that is maybe more complicated, but we thought it was actually just more, I mean, it was real. We didn't want to, you know, if we wanted to make a film about the issues that are in there, we would have approached it very differently. I think for us it was first, you know, there's this human story that's really captivating, and then it allows you in the film to explore these other things just because this guy was there and he touched in all these different things, you know. I mean, he did get married in public in 1972, had one of the first gay drag weddings, supposedly. So in a way, you have to look at that and be like, well, I mean, it is relevant. It does matter. He believed in that, whether he was a nice guy or not, you know. So.
And that, you know, that one line that he says about, you know, people couldn't walk down the street holding hands if you were gay. The cops would beat you up, or the straights would. Well, when we were finishing the film last summer, there were people getting beat up and seriously hurt in the West Village, and so you know, this is still an issue. There are still people worried, and we've come a long way. But I think, you know, for us it still seems timely.
Yeah.
Well, I hope a lot of people will discover this very interesting character in your movie or with your movie. And I also hope that it will raise some discussion and point out that there are still things that need to be done. And I thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Nice talk.